Welcome to the Two Worm Gaming review of Ship of Fools, an action roguelike co-op experience. So let's kick off with the graphics.
So starting off with the graphics, it's very reminiscent of Don't Starve, where you're these cartoony little fish people. You have these little flipping arms, cartoonishly walk around. It's a very well done, light feeling for the game, a very light vibe. Overall, I enjoyed the art, and it hits its mark.
The art style really fits with the characters, the story, the hub world. I feel like it's all kind of a nice vibe. You're in this like island. You are these little fish creatures, and you find more along the way. And you're kind of guided along by, I think it's like a snail person. You meet a fish with a hammer who helps you upgrade your ship. You meet a wizard with a long beard, and they're funny. The vibe that gets created on the island and among the characters is pretty good. But this is not a lore-heavy game. You're not going to learn the intricate details of who stole what shard of the Elden Ring. But let's talk music.
Oh, the music? Oh.
So you start off and you're chilling on these islands, and the music's all like... But then you get into these boss fights, and it's all like...
I feel like the music was spot on for the game. Feel like Jack Sparrow on the high seas fighting Davy Jones. You can't beat it. I feel like John Carpenter was right there just busting it out.
I felt like Keira Knightley. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, you understand. Hans Zimmer on the track with this one, you know.
I feel like Michael Bolton was right there. Well, let's move on to the actual core game. All right, so it's a roguelike. It's a roguelites, different mechanics in there. The niche that roguelikes hit are replayability, right? Every run is different. Talk to me about the customizability. Tell me about the replay.
Yeah, so there's all these different little fish people characters that you get to play as. They come with their own different abilities. Some of them can swing a paddle faster. You got ones that can repair the ship, and then they get a reward for it. You have ones that if they get hit, they activate their sicko mode. So, you know, they have different abilities. Then on top of that, the cannons can be customized. So you could have a sentry cannon, which is probably the best of the cannons. You could have a grape shot, which is pretty all right. There's the regular cannon.
I guess there's really three things you pick up on the way. There's like ship trinkets that power up the entire ship. So that'll be different between each round. Some is like all projectiles do bonus damage. Some of them are you get an extra repair or something like that. And then there's one that you can usually get each run that's like it's a big trade-off. So it's like you can't use a cannon for the rest of the zone, but then if you finish, you get kind of a big fat reward. So that's pretty cool. It's a nice risk-reward trade-off. But yeah, besides that, I think on the run you pick up just shots and you pick up a couple ship perks, and you can get personal trinkets as well that maybe adjust your, if you critically strike, they catch on fire or something like this. But I'd say the personal trinkets at least felt a little underwhelming. It was like 2% chance that you attack like something and set it on fire. Whereas like the cannon, if you just got a fire cannonball, is 100% chance that they catch on fire every time. I feel like the personal trinkets were less rewarding than the ship trinkets, but you could carry more personal trinkets as well. You had room for like 8, but the ship could only hold a maximum of... You could upgrade it, but starting with 3 shots plus trinkets together. So it felt a little bit like Slay the Spire, where you kind of choose your own path. It was a grid, sort of like Catan, where you can choose these hexagon tiles, and you have to go, as you move forward, you kind of can't go back, but you get to go along a path, and each tile has a different opportunity. There's like a skip tile, one is like a repair tile, one is like a shield tile. So when you beat that encounter, that's what you
pick up. You get all the trinkets, but then on top of that, there's also money you could pick up, repair stuff, shields for your boat, harpoons that you can use to grab things. So every time you go to one of these areas where you fight just regular enemies, or if you meet like a merchant along the way, every like 3 or so of those, the zones that are covered by the boss encroach on where you're going. So the boss is slowly moving your way, so eventually you're going to bump into it. So, you know, if you're doing sort of a slow zigzag back and forth, eventually you'll hit the boss because it's just going to keep encroaching on you, so you have to work your way towards it the entire time, but it's just always kind of moving your way.
What do you think about the controls? What do you think about the combat? It's the majority of the game, right?
Yeah, so we both played it on keyboard, but you could play it with, you know, gamepad, Xbox controller, whatever you prefer. And it felt good. You know, there was a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning because you use both E and space to both load ammo, pick up the cannon, move it around. And I am a klutz when it comes to that, so I kept on picking it up when I meant to put ammo in, or vice versa. It took a little bit to get used to it, because E is usually just opening inventory or stuff like that. But it felt good otherwise. You use your mouse to swing the paddle around to attack enemies if they get too close to the ship, or you can do a big spin move and knock ranged attacks that are coming at you away. And it all felt clean. The one thing about it is it's not friendly fire, but you can hit your ally. So it stuns them for a second if you do, which definitely, it's not a big ship. And a lot of times you might be moving, unless you corner off half for you and half for your buddy. You're going to be moving towards your friend, and you're going to hit them, or they're going to hit you, and you're going to be stunned for a second. But that also helps you at some points in the game. If you get stunned by an enemy, your friend can come over and hit you, and then you get released from the stun. So it kind of plays into the core gameplay there a little bit.
There's also the ability to roll, so you can roll through most enemy attacks, and all of the stuns are these usually kind of like long-standing lasers that a big crab is shooting at the boat, and it kind of sweeps across it, so you need to roll through it. That's what the roll is for. And I'd say the way that you actually take damage on the ship is, you as the character are invincible, you don't take damage, but the ship itself, I would say it mostly goes like this. Either creatures jump on the boat and you have to knock them off with your paddle in a certain amount of time, or ranged attacks they can either spawn enemies, or they'll shoot kind of like a fire onto your boat, and you've got like 3-4 seconds to paddle it out, That's pretty much how you take damage. The only thing left is, like you had already mentioned, this is you pick up a cannon and you put it down, and you load shots and you put them in, and you can kind of cycle through the different shots for different situations if you have enough on the boat. But yeah, that's pretty much the loop is. Yeah, let's talk about the grind. I mean, it's roguelike games, RPGs in general. There's usually a lot of like stat building. In this case, like we said, you've got cannons, you've got couple characters. Like, how did you feel the grind level was?
Honestly, not too bad. We were able to pick up the gameplay pretty quickly, and we made it to the second zone the first try. I think if you look at the reviews for the game, the biggest complaint a lot of folks have is it's just kind of short. So it almost felt like there wasn't much time really to grind. I think if you wanted to go to every different special encounter area, whether it be a merchant or the risk reward mechanic or something else, you could add on to the amount of time you're spent going places. I definitely think there's more you could do on like the island, just talking to folks, getting the different things that they offer or sell to you. But it's up to you. You can beat the game fairly quickly is the thing. So it just doesn't feel like there's a lot of time to grind, but you can grind if you want. But the game's not weighed down, I guess, by the amount of grind in it. You can beat it as quick as you want, or you can make it last longer by just going to different places. It kind of falls onto the player to make that decision what they want to do.
I would say I feel like a bit, it was like you don't have a ton of choice, because like there's no way to like farm really, because you kind of go until you die, right? And so if you just play a run, like we weren't intentionally like, we're gonna beat this with as few upgrades as possible. It's just like that's kind of where we made it. And like some of the upgrades from the fish wizard, the big fish wizard, he wants like 50 tentacles. The bosses drop tentacles, and the tentacles are what you can buy like ship upgrades with, the permanent ship upgrades. Those are those roguelike elements, the ship upgrades and cannons and this kind of stuff. And like his upgrades were like 50 tentacles, 70 tentacles, something insane like that, right? And every time you kill a boss, you get like 3. Well, there's 4 bosses, and it only took us so many runs, and you can get a few extra here and there for sure. But it felt like to me, there's like no way you could buy those upgrades without like, you'd have to do, I don't know, to buy everything, let's say you'd have to do like 50 runs. And I just feel like it took us, I think, less than 10. I just feel like there's no way unless you're really coming back. And I don't think there's new content after you beat it. It's replay the same zones. You just kind of have more stuff. So I don't know. And the diversity of the fights, maybe I would add, is not so different. I know the only part that I believe we felt was grindy was we had to keep doing zone 1, which is okay. That's how roguelikes go a lot of the time. You got to go through zone 1. but we didn't feel, I don't think we felt like super powerful. And so like not that it was hard per se, we were strong enough to beat it without taking much damage, and we understood the mechanics at this point, but it was kind of like even the boss would just take like minutes and minutes and minutes, even though it was like a complete non-threat. We took no damage because he just would go underwater, above water. It was kind of like a grind in that sense. We were like, take us back to zone 3, that's where we're at, that's where we belong. And I think because the main upgrade felt like the roguelike element to me, which is the cannons. Us upgrading the cannons is what did the damage. Our grape shot cannon and our sentry cannon with like a fire shot that we just picked up along the way destroyed, or we got like a special shot for like the final zone, destroyed the boss. And nothing that we picked up besides that shot along the way, like there was no I don't know, there just wasn't anything else in the run that made it feel like, oh, we have to go do another run because it'll feel so different. Like the upgrades were not that diverse, and so it kind of just felt like we were rerunning the first zone until we got a lucky shot.
Of all the grindiness of any kind of game, the first zone would probably be the most grindy, just because you have to keep going through it. Again, not a threat, but you just have to go through it to get to the other ones. There's not really a way to speed it up other than just increasing the damage of things you have, but your ship moves at a constant speed, and so spawns take a little bit. So
yeah, it felt like we were so much better as players, and our characters and cannons and everything was so much stronger, but the zone still took a third of the whole run because it was zone 1. Like it was a little faster, but on that last run I felt like we were still taking a long time kind of in zone 1, which is just like it was just odd. Like I feel like normally in RPGs or these kind of things, like you come back through in zone 1, it's a pub stomp, you know, you're like back in the boards killing forests, just slaughtering them. It shouldn't like still be that hard. And it was like we weren't getting hit, so it wasn't like a get good kind of situation. It was just like, you know, it's a DPS gated section and you're just kind of waiting. If you were to describe the difficulty and the learning curve of it overall, what would you say?
Everything you learn in the first zone is kind of everything you need. And then when you come back whenever you die, after your starter cannon's there, and you explore, you know, the different parts of the island, and on your journeys you find, you know, the different NPCs that can kind of help you out and increase the, you know, the types of cans you can get on your ship, etc. Once you learn the mechanics in the first zone, you're kind of set. There's not really like a big curve after that, in terms of, you know, you have to learn the new NPCs or the new enemies and the new zones there, but you're going to come back to them probably 2 to 3 times at least. And so, you know, once you see them once, there's not really anything new to learn. So once you get to a zone once and you fight the enemies there and you come back to it, it's not really a new challenge in that zone. It's kind of just, you know, the same thing you did before, but now you have better weapons. So there's sort of an initial difficulty, but I would not say there's like a big jump in difficulty every zone you go. It's just kind of once you get there, you learn, and then it just plateaus.
Yeah, I'd build on that and just say I think there's like I feel like there was 3 buckets, and each bucket caught us off guard once, and then it kind of got repeated in other zones, and then we never really had trouble again, which is like, first, things shoot fire on the ship. Like we talked about earlier, you got to paddle it out. That definitely caught us in the beginning of like, what's doing damage? Okay. Then there's something will walk up to the side of the ship and smack it, and you're like, oh, I thought it was going to do a range attack, but okay, I get that now. I got to paddle them away. And then that kind of got combined for us. I remember we wiped on the pufferfish because they just blew up an entire line and we lost our entire ship's health in one go. So there's like, once that happened once, we were like, all right, so we'll kill them or we'll knock them away. And that was, after that, it was like they swapped out a crab for a bird, like a ghost bird. They swapped out a skeleton bird for an owl. But essentially, some things approached the ship, some things shot stuff from far away. A couple things jumped on the ship, which is essentially the same as the kind of flame range attacks. And once you've got those down, like you learn how to roll and slap your paddle and reflect something in the first 30 seconds, and there's really nothing new. I think the only like kind of advanced mechanic that we picked up, if you could call it that, is like when your partner gets stunned, you can hit them. And so when it does become really chaotic, even though half the time it's an accident anyways, you can kind of optimize helping other people's mistakes in that way. But that's about as deep as it is to learn. You kind of get used to whacking things on the ship. You can reflect, but it's not too necessary. Yeah, I think it's tough in the beginning with all the buttons because I did the same thing. You're picking stuff up, you're putting it down, you won't try to load the cannon, but you're picking it up instead. That keeps happening. But once you've got that down, which is just E and spacebar, you're pretty much skill capped, I felt. So final verdict, what do you think?
Yeah, and some, aesthetics fantastic, music wonderful, combat easy to pick up and clean. You felt like you're moving around nicely, and after the initial sort of figuring out, e-space things like that. After you get all the mechanics down, you're running with it. So all that phenomenal. The biggest complaint I think that I would have, and it's not long. We beat it in 3 hours. Max probably 10 hours to do everything in the game. I can't imagine going longer than that. But for $15, and we got it for 12. I thought it was well worth the money. I enjoyed it. Kept us entertained the whole time. And we'd go back and do more things. But if there was just more bosses or more zones, I think that would only improve it. Taking everything into account and just wishing it was a little bit longer, I'd give it a 3.9. I think, like I said before, everything was great, just needs to be a little bit longer and maybe a little bit more variability in some of the zones, some of the fights, some of the mechanics in terms of some of the enemies there, just so you feel challenged every time you go to a new zone and it doesn't feel like you're just slogging through to get to the boss after you did it once.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like I'd give it a solid 3 out of 5. I don't want to punish it necessarily for being short, in my opinion. I'd rather have a short game that's good than a long game with unnecessary grinding where I'm picking up flowers to craft arrows so I can shoot a boss. I'm not about it. So I don't fault it for being short. I do think that in a game that is that short, you expect a high level of diversity and kind of an increase in mechanics the entire time. I do feel like for me where it fell short was you got to roll, you got to paddle. Whatever you needed in zone 1, it was the same in zone 2 and it was the same in zone 3, and the final boss was there. Nothing was new. So I felt like for me, while it was 4 hours and I think it felt fresh-ish because it was all new, it felt like something could have evolved over that time and there wasn't that thing for me. So totally agree. The music, the aesthetic, the look, it's a lot of fun. We were entertained the whole time, which is all you can ask for. If you get 100% enjoyment out of the time you put into it, that's great. Who's it for? I think it would be for someone who's looking for like a single session game. Like it is almost definitely a single session co-op game. You can play solo, but I think it's probably a much better co-op experience. And I think, it's something if you're looking for a single session, it's about the same price as going to the movie theater. I feel like that's kind of what it's for. If you're a hardcore roguelike enjoyer, you like Binding of Isaac, something like this game is not going to scratch that itch. You can't put hundreds of hours into this, I think, realistically. There's not that much content. There's not that much customizability. The max that you have is different combinations of characters, and within a run, what's random is maybe some trinkets, maybe some shots, versus like a true roguelike experience where you have these 10, 20, 30 different combinations of health, armor, weapons, damage, and things that kind of stack together. It doesn't feel like that is possible in this game.
You don't have to do Steam couch co-op. There's an actual online dedicated mechanic, which, coming from Cuphead where we had to do couch co-op, it felt so nice, not to have any lag, not to have to mess around with the couch co-op mechanic there. So, it's a fun thing to play if you got a friend, one night. It's an easy, fun game to get into.
If you made it to the end, thanks so much for watching. That was our review of Ship of Fools. Catch you in the next one.